issue. And then a tape made by a remarkable man who I'm going to tell you about later, Len Hope. Over and over, we would have these experiences of, a sudden email contact from somebody who apparently needed their story told, or an ancestor story. Somebody taking us aside and saying, I've got all of these artifacts of green flake, and did you know that my great-grandfather was at this Pioneer Appreciation Day where green flake spoke? And I have the words. All of a sudden, we're accessing stuff that I've never seen anyplace else, and it really was the windows of heaven. It has been an absolutely remarkable project. So let me tell you about, we lost it. All right, now you can help. Let's move on to the next one. You've seen Elijah. I think the big thing I want you to notice about him is his race. Anybody have any questions? Is there a chance that he's white? Probably not. Is this just somebody's depiction? I actually talked to Richard Van Wagner, who helped write Book of Mormons with Steve Walker, and said, where did you get that? And he said, we found it in a museum. The paper appears to be appropriately time dated. We think this is an official likeness of Elijah Abel. We know from census records that he was listed either as black or as mulatto. But certainly he was of African descent. There really was no question of that. Now, let me see if this works. No? All right. So what do I have to do? Right here?
Yes.
And push the other button. If you'd like to do that, thank you.
I'll do that for you.
Okay. I can write. We want you to know what attention the church has been paying to Elijah Abel and to some of our other pioneers. This is the Elijah Abel Monument. The Genesis Group, and we'll field questions about the Genesis Group. President Gray was just released as president after 6 incredible years of service this past Sunday. This is Elder Ballard with the guy whose name I don't remember, the Mormon Foundation. If you know, then you Anyway, this is the monument to Elijah Abel that we dedicated this past summer, last year, that talks about who he was. It's right next to his grave in the Salt Lake Cemetery, and mentions his priesthood, that he held it, and Elder Ballard spoke about it. He spoke about the priesthood revelation of 1978, paid tribute to this black man, and did say that he was a black man. The reason I emphasize that is that there actually did arise some controversy over whether or not people said, well, there were 2 Elijah Abels, one was white, one was black. And there were some other things. As soon as his race was discovered, he was dropped from the quorum. And so we just want to kind of put those to bed quickly and move on. Don't need to spend a lot of time with them. If you want to go up to the Salt Lake Cemetery, find Elijah Abel. He's buried next to his wife, Mary Ann, and the monument is right there beside him. We had wonderful support from the church. We've had general authorities present at a number of things where we've been able to pay tribute to our black pioneers. Next, please. Oh, you do that so well. Jane James is probably the most famous of the pioneers. How many of you have heard of Jane? But not everybody. Interesting. This is her brother. His name was Isaac. We call him Lou in the books because her husband was also named Isaac. And this is the best picture we have of Jane. There's another picture where she's with a lot of the pioneers, but let me just give you sort of the basics of her life, because what my goal here has a fairly liberal focus. I just want to give you a sense of the black legacy in this church. I can't do it in a full. I can't tell you everybody who joined the church and recite their testimony, but I can tell you of a few of them, and then you consider that they are not the only ones. Consider that all of us are dealing with a racist history in this nation. That at the time the church was founded in 1830, at the time Elijah Abel joined in 1832, the Nat Turner case, 1831, was fresh news. There was fear of slave uprisings. There was all sorts of fear of what was going to be happening because of the race issue, all throughout the nation. And we're not even going to go into what happened in Missouri with the driving out of the Latter-day Saint people and the association of the slavery issue with that. But Jane Manning James came in contact with the missionaries, Charles Wandell, I'll mention them in case any of you are related, in Connecticut, and became converted, and in fact had a vision of Joseph Smith. And if you heard the dedication of the Nauvoo Temple by when Elder Monson spoke on the Thursday, I didn't hear it. My husband came home just absolutely thrilled because he had quoted Jane Manning James. And it was from an interview she did with the young women in the Young Women's Journal, where she said, I saw Joseph Smith's face, I saw it plain, and I had to gather to Nauvoo. Now, it wasn't easy for black people to go anywhere, especially if you're moving from Connecticut, which was a free state, to Illinois, where very recently we've had the execution of an abolitionist publisher, Elijah Lovejoy. And in fact, they were stopped in Peoria, Illinois. Let me backtrack just a little bit to give you some of the most poignant parts of her life history. They began walking from Wilton, they began from Wilton, Connecticut, intending on taking a canal boat from Buffalo, New York, but they were told they couldn't get on the canal boat unless they could present their money immediately, which they could not do. But again, if a boat is to take on so many people of color, we expect something a little different of you, and certainly not uncommon in the time. So Jane says, so we began to walk. We walked 800 miles. We walked until the soles of our shoes wore out, and we could see the blood, our footprints in blood on the snow. We knelt in prayer. We asked God, the Eternal Father, to heal our feet, and our prayers were answered, and our feet were healed forthwith. We went on our way, singing praises to God and thanking Him for His goodness and mercies in healing our feet as He had. That was her attitude. Shortly thereafter, they were stopped by a sheriff who threatened to put them in jail unless they could show their free papers. And she said the only papers we had were our membership records in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, since they had never been slaves. Her mother had been a slave, but Jane had not. Then finally, they came to Nauvoo. And we don't know what all happened. She has one sentence where she says, we met much rebuff. Certainly there must have been suspicion even from the saints. We would hope that we would be better, but we know what the times were like. And they experienced some difficult things that she summarizes just in that phrase. We experienced much rebuff. And then finally, Orson Spencer led them to the mansion house where Joseph and Emma were living. And interestingly, you have to imagine, they've walked 800 miles. We know that Jane did not have the clothes that she had planned on having. She had put her trunk of clothes on the boat in Buffalo. They hadn't arrived. They never did arrive in Nauvoo. So she's probably wearing the same dress she's been wearing for 800 miles. They've gone through rivers up to their necks, she talks about. They've slept outside where the snow would fall on their faces. And here they are at the mansion house. Emma Smith meets them at the door and says, come in, all of you. And these are the words from Jane's own life history. So they went inside. Joseph Smith came down and said to some women in the parlor, we've got company come, and then invited this black family to come inside and told them, I want to hear about all of your trials. Jane was the spokesperson, and Joseph Smith said to her, you have been the leader of this little band, haven't you? And she said, I have, sir. And then the way she puts it, I told him all we had experienced and much more than I can now recount as my memory has faded. Some of us can identify with that. Dr. Bernheisel was with him. Joseph Smith turned to Dr. Bernheisel and said, is that faith? Dr. Bernheisel replied, I rather believe it is. I think if it had been me, I would have turned around and returned to my home. Of course, her trials did not end there. Her husband left her for 20 years, returned. They were divorced, but he died in her home, and his funeral was held at her home. Not only that, but she had begun petitioning for temple blessings. Interestingly, the date of her first petition is the date of Elijah Abel's death. So we associate those two things together. Elijah Abel died Christmas Day, 1884. Jane James goes to John Taylor on that very same day.